On July 26, 2003, at approximately 3:45 in the afternoon, Christopher Allison and his family were driving back to Pocatello, Idaho from their vacation in Washington. Suddenly and unexpectedly, their vehicle was struck by another driver from the rear, jackknifing their camper and overturning their Ford Expedition, crushing and killing Christopher and injuring the rest of the Allison family. Today, the Insider Exclusive will show you how the Allisons lawyers, Robert Krause and Emily Rankin of the Spence Law Firm, took on Ford Motor Company and successfully sued them for the defective product design of the door latch and component system and other defects, and got justice for the Allison family. Hi, I'm Steve Murphy, and this is the Insider Exclusive, live from the Spence Law Firm in Gerry Spence's office in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Stay tuned. It gives me great pleasure to introduce the lawyers for the Allison family. Bob Krause, welcome to the show.
Thanks for coming out, Steve.
And Emily Rankin.
Thank
correct?
you.
Welcome
Correct.
to the show. This is an unusual case in the sense that we had a family that unfortunately the father of the family was killed in an accident that was as a direct result of a product defect of the Expedition SUV, wasn't it?
That's correct, Steve.
Tell us step by step what happened in this story.
You know, it's a very sad story, Steve. I think first, Chris was just, a wonderful guy. He was 36 years old, married to Shannon Allison. They had been together for 16 years. They had 5 wonderful children between ages of 1 and 10. He had a great career going. He had just everything going for him. And it's a really sad story. Emily spent a lot of time with the family getting to know them, and I think she could probably provide, give us a little information about what a great guy Chris was and what a wonderful family this was.
I can. It's amazing how you can really get to know the man, this father, by meeting his children and his wife, and just to learn what a strong presence he was in their lives. He was the kind of hands-on dad that was playing in the yard with the kids, taking them fishing, taking them camping. He was a wonderful father, and I think it was best described by his parents at his eulogy, actually, in his eulogy, when they said that he was like a strong tree with 5 little monkeys crawling all around him.
How old were his children? What range?
Ages 1 through 10. 5 children.
And they were coming back from vacation, I understand.
They had just spent a week camping in Washington with some friends. Water skiing, having a lot of fun together, and they were driving back to Pocatello, Idaho, and they were almost home. Chris was driving the family's 1999 Ford Expedition, was pulling the 19-foot camp trailer, when another driver fell asleep and drifted off the left side of the road. And when he woke up, he panicked, overcorrected, and when he jerked the steering wheel back onto the highway, he lost control of his vehicle. It slid across the highway, slammed into the camper, and as you can probably picture, the camper and the Expedition jackknifed. They disconnected from each other, and the Expedition started rolling over the highway and into the median. And unfortunately, Chris got partially ejected from the vehicle and died at the scene, died shortly afterwards, and Shannon and the 5 kids all suffered pretty serious injuries in the accident.
It was kind of amazing that what happened with the vehicle, and would you describe why, in essence, he was killed?
Well, maybe I should give you a little background about what we did into this case to try to determine what was wrong with the vehicle, the defect. When the family first came to us, they just wanted to know what had happened. Why did Shannon, the 5 kids, all walk away from this accident with injuries when Chris had got killed. And so the first thing we did was we requested the police report, the police photographs, and the medical records so we could see if we could piece together exactly what had happened. And when Emily and I started looking at the police photographs, there was one photograph in particular that really struck us as being unusual. And there was a photograph of the expedition which showed the driver's door was open, and not only was it open, but it had been bent back in this accident. So we knew at some point in this accident sequence that door had come open, and then the door had made contact with the ground and gotten folded back. And that struck us as being highly unusual because there are federal regulations which are designed specifically to force automobile manufacturers to design their vehicles so that doors stay closed during reasonably foreseeable accidents.
And these were in effect at that time?
They were. I think they actually went into effect in 1968, if I remember correctly, Steve. But they've been in effect for a long time. And it's just common sense. I mean, I think everybody knows that if you stay inside the vehicle, you have a much better chance of either surviving the accident or suffering less severe injuries. And that's why we have mandatory seatbelt laws in this country, because everybody knows that if you stay inside the vehicle, you've got a better chance of surviving it. And so Emily and I we spent a lot of time looking at that photograph, just trying to, something's not right. This shouldn't have happened. And so we hired Knott Laboratories down in Centennial, Colorado, and Dr. Richard Zernicki, who is an accident reconstruction expert, to go out to the scene with us to see if we could actually reconstruct what had happened in this case. And we spent 2 days out at the scene, actually going back, finding the skid marks that were made by the Grand Am when it came off the, when it came back on the highway.
That hit him from the rear.
Yep, the gouge marks that were on the road that were caused by the vehicle, we were able to find those. And then we spent hours just walking around in the median of the highway trying to find debris that may have been deposited during the accident so we could try to recreate exactly what had happened in this case. And we took a lot of laser measurements, so we could pinpoint exactly where everything was located on the highway and in the median.
Right. What's a laser measurement?
They actually take a laser and they can accurately measure down to, I think, within 1/100th of an inch.
Really?
Exactly where things are pinpointed.
And your expert from Colorado was doing all this for you?
Correct.
Yeah.
And so after we spent 2 days at the scene and acquired all this information, Dr. Zernicki took all that information back to Colorado, and they're using a computer program. He was actually able to create a computer simulation of exactly what had happened in this accident. If you watch this video, Steve, you can see at the beginning the median.
Yes.
It comes to rest on its wheels.
Mm-hmm.
If you go back and you actually play that again in slow motion, right here you can see the Grand Am is completely off the interstate or the highway.
Mm-hmm.
And when we come back, you'll be able to see we were actually able to go back and find those tire marks in the dirt on the side of the highway.
Did the police pick this stuff up too?
A lot of it was shown in the police photographs. Really? And so one of the things that we were able to do in this case was what's known as photogrammetry. We were able to take the police photographs and then go back and find the exact position where that highway patrolman was standing at the time he took the photograph. And we were able to take another photograph in exactly the same position to match up the tire marks and the skid marks on the road. If you watch, the Grand Am comes on and hits the front left corner of the camper. And right here, the vehicles are starting to jackknife. Right there, they separate. The camper continued going down, and the expedition started rolling down the median. And you can see right there if you can see that the door, the driver's door, starts to come open in the accident. In the next roll sequence, the driver's side hits the ground and the door gets bent back.
And it should have remained closed.
And I believe very strongly, and we actually hired experts to confirm this, that if that door had stayed closed, Chris would have survived this accident and would be alive today.
And I think it's important to mention, too, that Chris had his seatbelt on.
Yes.
So he was properly restrained and still was allowed to be partially ejected from the vehicle.
When you were researching this case, preparing it to go to trial, you must have come across other incidents with this same product defect, correct?
Actually, we did. Actually, we started investigating. We got in contact with other attorneys throughout the country who actually had similar cases or clients that they were also investigating. And what we found out that there were a number of other accidents that have occurred throughout the country where either driver's doors or the passenger doors have come open in these accidents.
Right. I'm just kind of curious, how many other cases? Approximately.
You know, unfortunately, I think the problem is that it probably has occurred hundreds of times, but most people don't realize that there was a defect in their door and never pursued investigating exactly what happened.
Or there may not have been a serious injury.
Yeah. The only reason I asked that question is if you remember the Dodge Dakota pickup truck or the Dodge Dakota model. I recently did an interview with an attorney that represented someone who, you know, the transmission slipped from park to drive and they were killed. You know, the truck ran over them. I found out that 1,400 other incidents had happened and Dodge hadn't corrected anything. But this is a very interesting point because, as you bring up, Emily, a lot of people could be killed. You wouldn't have known that. That was smart detective work. What happened then?
Well, as I said, we got in touch with other lawyers. We started doing a lot of investigation to try to determine why that door had come open. Because as Emily said, Chris was found actually leaning out of the driver's door. He still had his seatbelt on, and he had suffered massive head traumas to the left side of his head, which was consistent with his head striking the ground during this rollover accident. So we hired another expert by the name of Dr. Jayevsky, who is a biomechanic expert. And basically what he does is he has studied how people move in different accidents. And a lot of his research has been done for the federal government in connection with with fighter pilots, for example, in planes. They want to know in an ejection or in severe G-force turns how the body is going to move and react to those forces. And based on his studies, he was able to determine exactly how Christopher's body moved during this rollover sequence, and we were able to pinpoint exactly when his head came out of that occupant compartment and struck the ground.
Interesting. It's kind of like these safety videos you see, crash test type videos, right? You gathered this information, and what happened then?
We filed a lawsuit against Ford and the driver of the other vehicle, and spent a lot of time. I mean, this Ford produced thousands and thousands of pages of documents.
Sometimes a large manufacturer will do what's called a document dump, correct? They give you millions of pages hoping you will never find what you're looking for. Is that right?
It's pretty accurate in this case. I mean, I would guess we got maybe 50, 75 boxes, and then it got to the point where they started producing the documents on CDs and DVDs, where literally there'd be, you know, thousands and thousands of pages on each CD.
It's an important point here for our audience to understand what they're doing. They're hoping to bury you with so much information you won't find what you need, right?
That's our belief. I'm sure Ford has a different view, but boy, that's sure what it seems like.
But sure what it feels like, too, when you're reviewing those documents.
Oftentimes they give you the information you were looking for anyway if you look closely at it, right?
And in this case, we actually found a very interesting video.
This has to deal with the door latch and the component defect, right?
It does. And what we were able to learn in this case is that, as I think everyone knows, the car manufacturers use similar parts
Yes.
on a lot of different vehicles. And what we learned in this case was the same latching mechanism that was used in the Ford Expedition was also used in the Ford F-150 doors.
Really?
And we found a video that was produced by Transport Canada, and Emily can talk about that.
We did, and it involves a demonstration where there was a side impact on a Ford F-150, and we'll see here there are two dummies, one in the driver's seat and one in the passenger seat. And as the side impact occurs, you can see both of the dummies shift, and in fact the passenger dummy come outside of the car once the door opens, and you can see his head come outside of the car. And we can show it again in slow motion, and it shows the same thing. So it's the same dynamic that occurred here with Chris,
Yes.
where once he was hit, the door opened, and it allowed him, although properly restrained, allowed his head to come out of the car.
When was that produced?
When was that produced, Bob?
It was produced during the course of the litigation, along with the thousands of other documents and
No.
videotapes.
When did that? How long had they had this information, this safety information?
Well, that's one of the sad parts about this case, Steve, is that this Transport Canada, and you have to understand, Transport Canada is the equivalent of what we have in the United States as the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. Their job is to make sure that the vehicles that are going on our highways are safe for
Right.
people. And this video was actually produced, and we believe was actually sent to Ford long before Chris Allison was killed. And so Ford had notice that there was a defect in their doors. And despite knowing of that, they never notified Chris, and as far as we know, any other owners of their vehicles, that this defect existed. And we believe very strongly, I mean, if you knew there was a defect in your door that could kill you,
Yes.
you'd take it back to the shop and get it fixed.
Yes.
And if Ford had just sent a notice to Chris and let him know that there was a defect, none of this would have happened, and Chris would be alive today.
Yeah, we see this time and time again with manufacturers being aware of defects in their products, and they don't do anything about it. So now you're in this same situation. The Allison family, Chris is deceased now. What do you do next? You've gathered this information.
Well, you know, we're going through the lawsuit, and we were getting ready to go for trial, and we were only about a month out from trial.
Right.
When finally Ford offered to settle the case. And we were able to settle the case out of court for a confidential amount.
It's a little unusual that a manufacturer jumps to settlement before you even go to trial. Had you provided them the information you were going to present in court?
Yes, during the discovery we had to produce. I mean, they had, for example, the animation that we showed you, we produced that to them. They had taken depositions of all of our expert witnesses. So they knew exactly what we were going to be able to prove, and I think they realized that they had a problem with their door.
Particularly with that video that you showed, that product defect, right?
Yes.
Exactly. And they also had an opportunity to meet our family, which I think was really important, because this family would have presented very well, and they would have been able to tell their story to the jury, and I think it would have been quite compelling.
When a manufacturer makes an offer, obviously the Spence Law Firm, any law firm, counters that offer, right? Were they kind of receptive to that?
They were. There was a lot of back and forth negotiating until we came up with a number that we believe was a fair settlement for the family.
In any type of settlements, do you make the request that they change their product, that they correct their defect so that other people out there don't get injured?
We always ask, we always try to make that a condition of the settlement, and it's very rare that we can ever force the manufacturer to do that. There have been a few instances. I had another case against General Motors several years ago where, as a part of the settlement, General Motors agreed to conduct a full investigation, and as a result of that investigation, there was actually a recall of the defective product. It was a seatbelt in that case. And I felt very good about that, and I know the family that we represented in that case felt it was even more important to them than the settlement, because they had lost a daughter in that case, and they didn't want anybody else to die. And so when they learned that General Motors had conducted this investigation and determined they needed to do a recall, it really made the family very happy, because they felt as if their daughter's death may prevent someone else from dying.
And that's the hope, if I can just say. The hope is that with the courage of these families to bring these cases, because it is a courageous act on their part, that by doing that, these companies will change their ways, and people will not be hurt in the future.
You brought up an interesting point. I was unaware of this. Usually in a settlement between, your law firm and a manufacturer, it's between the lawyers. But you brought up the point that they had a chance to meet the family.
They did.
It's kind of unusual, isn't it?
Was
that your suggestion, or did they want to?
We wanted them to meet this family. We wanted them to see the kids, and they had the opportunity to do that, and I think it was...
So the law firm that represented Ford met with the kids?
They did.
How long did that take place? A day or something?
No, it was part of a day, but I think it was enough time for them to get a sense of these kids and truly what they lost. I mean, these kids lost their father. They will not have a father in their life for the rest of their life. They will not have a father to teach them things, to give them advice, and to be with them on those important dates in their future.
As you know, I just filmed a documentary on the Trial Lawyers College, and one of the principles, fundamentals, is getting in touch with, your client. I find it unusual and it's a very positive thing to have that family meet with a manufacturer, because that's probably one of the reasons why they decided that maybe they should settle with them, correct?
I certainly think so. I mean, as Emily said, this was just a wonderful family. If you look at those family photographs, I mean, Chris was just the all-American boy. And what really struck me as we were going through this case was everybody you talked to, it wasn't just that they couldn't say anything unkind about Chris. It was just that they bent over backwards and said what a wonderful guy he was. And by the end of the case, I mean, I felt sad that I never had the chance to get to know Chris before he died, because he just seemed like he was just a great guy. And it really is sad that, one of the kids was only 1 year old at the time his dad died. He'll never get to know Chris. He's never even going to have a memory of what his father was like, and that's sad.
The Spence Law Firm handles a lot of these type of cases, protecting and representing people who have suffered catastrophic type accidents like this. How do you decide to take a case? I'm sure a lot of people contact you and say, help me. This particular case, what moved you to take this case?
It was, first, before we take any case, we do a very thorough investigation to determine exactly what happened and to determine if we think somebody was at fault and who that party is. Because we certainly do not want to file a lawsuit against somebody who we don't believe was at fault for the accident. We also spend a lot of time getting to know the family, because I think it's important that we have a comfort factor with the family. They feel comfortable with us, and we feel comfortable with them. And normally, when a family comes to us, at first, it's not just the lawsuit that you have to deal with. There's a lot of emotional injuries and a lot of financial issues that need to be dealt with also. And so we spend a lot of time at first just getting to know the family and helping them deal with the loss, because usually there's a very serious injury or a loss of a family member involved. And so there's a lot of emotional issues that we have to deal with and financial issues before we ever get to the lawsuit.
Absolutely.
But there's a lot of cases that people contact you about. What makes you decide to take a particular type of case?
I think there are many factors. Like Bob said, I think meeting the family is one of the most important factors, but also if we have a sense that we can change something, that we can make a difference in the future. And I think this case is a perfect example where we felt that we could do some good in the future and maybe change the way these companies think and the way they act.
What impressed me is you're willing to go the full length to get the right experts to prove your case. And also the mindset that if they didn't settle, you would have taken this to trial, wouldn't you?
We were ready to go, no question about that. And as I said, when this case settled, we were only a few weeks out from trial.
Yeah. So it's that, as Gerry says, that preparation that puts you in a position of being a positive force for your client, right?
Absolutely.
What gives, I'll ask you, Emily,
Sure.
first. What gives you the greatest satisfaction of being a lawyer?
That's a great question, Steve. And I think that it truly is, at the end of the day, when the case is settled or we have a verdict, is just being with the clients and seeing that in their faces that we have made a difference and that they have gotten some sense of justice. It may not bring Chris back
Right.
in this case. It may not bring another loved one back or heal their injuries, but they do have that sense that they have done the right thing and
Right.
they've made a difference.
What about you, Bo?
Same as Emily. It's just that satisfaction you get that at the end of the case, you know you've made a difference in somebody's life.
It's been a pleasure having you on the program. Keep up the good work, Bob.
Hey, Steve, thank you for coming out here and talking to us.
Okay.
We appreciate it.
And Emily, been a pleasure also. Keep up the good work.
Thank you, Steve. It was
You're
a pleasure.
upholding the name of the Spence firm 100%.
Thank you.
You can get more information about our guest and the Spence Law Firm at www.insiderexclusive.tv, and you can watch some of their documentaries at LegalShowtime.com. Thank you.